Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
A lot of the pioneers of the JFK conspiracy assassination research movement, they're getting old. And over the years, we've had some of the real pioneers pass away and leave us. There aren't too many left. And I kind of wanted to get down there one more time just to talk to Robert Groden, who's one of my favorite people and who I love to sit and chat with every time I go to Dealey Plaza. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your past experiences going to the JFK conferences and down to Dallas on the anniversary.
Well, I was in Dallas once for a separate business event, and in a short break, I was visiting from out of town. I borrowed someone's pickup truck, and another buddy came along to go to Dealey Plaza. It was the one and only time that I've been to Dealey Plaza, and it was at night. It was around 8 o'clock at night, and it was already dark. I guess it was the fall or the late fall or whatever, but at least I got there. So I was able to experience for myself a couple things. After studying the assassination so much, I was really struck by what a small area it is, and also what a steep, to me it seemed surprisingly steep, Elm Street going down along the grassy knoll. And at night, I felt like I was in this sunken bathtub. I felt like this is just this ignominious off ramp to you're leaving the city in this little. I didn't see it in its splendor during the day and the white, fixtures all nice and whatever. I saw it at night, and I just thought, what an ignominious thing. But I got to stand on the place where Zapruder stood, and I'm really glad that I banged my shin really hard on the edge of the marble.
Ooh,
because that just stopped me cold.
Ooh.
Like,
whoa,
I'm not here to suffer. And
that marble monument that they have in Dealey Plaza.
Like where you get up on Zapruder's pedestal.
Oh, the Zapruder pedestal. Yes,
he's climbing on that. I banged the front of my shin on the corner. Well, I'm gonna say it's marble because that's how hard it felt.
Yeah,
and it was great because what that did was indelibly mark the memory. There's nothing like a smack in the face to make you remember, a day and time.
That's right.
And it was, even though it was night and I was only really there for maybe 15, 20 minutes, it just was not what I would have done, but at least it's, better little than nothing. Mm-hmm. And it still was profound. It still was really, 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 really profound. I stood behind the picket fence. So you've probably been there
many times.
Many times. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And, I've been there during the daytime and, Dealey Plaza is always bustling during the day, especially at the lunch hour, because it's a city park and a lot of the workers in the buildings downtown take their lunch hour in the park. So you'll see, couples out there having picnics and kids on the weekends playing in the park. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because to historians like us, it's a sacred spot. It's sacred ground where a tragedy occurred. And yet to your average, downtown Dallas resident, it's just their local city park and they go have fun down there. They're not there to cry. They're not there to take the JFK tour. They're not interested in any of that. They're just they're just playing frisbee in the park. But I've also been there at night, Bruce, and there's something really, I actually wrote an article about it some 15, 16 years ago called Midnight in Dealey Plaza. And I worked up the nerve. Of course, it's not the best neighborhood, or it wasn't then. I worked up the nerve to go down to Dealey Plaza at midnight. And there was really something spooky about it because that's when the place is quiet. There's nobody there. It's just you and the silence. And that's when you really feel, if there are ghosts in Dealey Plaza, that's when you feel them. Woo! I got a chill down my spine just talking about that. Actually, that's a memory I'll never forget. It's forever imprinted in my mind. And there was this gorgeous full moon shining over Dallas that night.
Well, thank you for describing that. I just vicariously lived it through my imagination. And I want to ask, Rick, I know Lori has studied JFK. I certainly have. Do you have a special interest, or what's your thoughts about him?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? When I was a kid, you know, I've said this on the program before. Going down to the public library, they had Super 8mm film there of the assassination, and I used to go down and take it out on loan on a fairly regular basis and take it home and watch it. And yeah, I've been to Dealey Plaza. I've been to the museum. So yeah, it's an important piece of history, and I wouldn't say that I'm any kind of expert on the subject, but yeah, certainly I've taken note of it and tried to educate myself to some degree.
I'm curious, Rick, when you visited the 6th floor museum there at Dealey Plaza, the old Texas School Book Depository, what did you think of the experience?
I don't know, as a Canadian coming down, it just felt like a museum until I got to the window and I looked down. There was something about that, looking down from where the shots were supposed to have been fired from, you know. That was, you could kind of see how it was all laid out.
And so everybody who stands in that window can't help, especially if you're familiar with firearms, you can't help but try to imagine making that shot.
Right. And it was kind of like, no way. But
no way. That's exactly what I said too.
Yeah. No way.
Yeah. Well, you know, where the shots came from and of course who fired those shots is still a hotly debated topic to this day among JFK historians and people who have devoted their entire lives to studying this case. I'm kind of part of that community, and in our forums and at our conferences, we have historians on both sides duking it out. Even 60 years later, we don't know all the facts. Everybody has their own theory, of course, as to what happened. And I wanted to show you guys a clip. I think this is from News Nation. This is a clip they just posted yesterday. They sent a crew down to Dallas and got to talk to Robert Groden, of course, our friend Robert Groden, and some of the people who are filing in for this year's marking of the 60th anniversary. Take a look at this.
This month marks 60 years since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and over these past 6 decades, serious questions have persisted about what happened that fateful day in Dallas, fueled by an intermittent drip of new revelations. Well, this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, our News Nation special report, Unsolved, the JFK Assassination, will give you a closer look at firsthand accounts shedding new light on what eyewitnesses saw and heard that day. News Nation's special correspondent Ross Coulthart will host that special. Here's a preview of his conversation with a former Yale professor who's dedicated his life to uncovering the truth.
For 60 years, Josiah Thompson has investigated that key question: who killed JFK?
It was much easier to simply say Oswald did it, but he couldn't have done it.
Thompson, a former Yale professor, has spent decades digging into the evidence, literally writing the book casting doubts on the government's official lone gunman theory. Thompson says the evidence he's gathered proves the fatal shot came from the grassy knoll. Before retiring in 2011, Thompson worked as a private investigator for 35 years, including on high-profile criminal cases like the Patty Hearst kidnapping and the Oklahoma City bombing trial. And this Sunday, in our News Nation special report, he reveals whether he believes the government conspired to kill the president.
Well, I'm sure that if the government wanted to reinvestigate the case, they would end up with the scenario that I've ended up with after 60 years of being with this case. That this scenario works.
Also this Sunday, you'll meet Robert Groden, a photographic technician who took a copy of the Zapruder film while he worked for Life magazine.
I have published the testimony I got from the doctors. I went and I questioned them all myself, over 20 of them. Every single one of them said that the shot came from the front. How did they come to that conclusion? Because the exit wound was in the back of his head.
To this day, he takes his research and theory very literally out in the open. Many weekends, you can find him selling books and videos on the infamous grassy knoll. Do you believe there was an active collusion by the Warren Commission members to suppress evidence that suggested a second shooter?
Without question.
And News Nation's special correspondent Ross Coulthart joins us now. Hey, Ross, you know, it's incredible that 60 years later, there has still been there's so many people who were there that day who still have questions about what happened.
Hi, Elizabeth. Yes, you're right. And the thing I find most extraordinary about this case, I've always been fascinated with the JFK case from Australia, where I first lived. And the thing that strikes me about it is when you look at the evidence, when you look at the number of witnesses, you know, there were 88 people, possibly as many as 100, who say that they saw smoke or heard shots from the grassy knoll. Most of them weren't interviewed by the Warren Commission. They weren't brought up before the Warren Commission. And there is a lot of evidence that the official government inquiry didn't investigate at the time. And I think a lot of the story that we're telling this Sunday asks that question, why?
Yeah.
Why is it that the American people haven't been told about that other evidence?
Well, let's talk about the new information you have suggesting that the wound on the president's neck was actually an entrance wound, not an exit wound. If true, how does that change everything?
Oh, it's basically what it means. If it was an entrance wound, it means that there was at least one other shooter on the grassy knoll, because that's where it's very likely that shot came from. And I do think, personally, the evidence is compelling. It's quite extraordinary. Witnesses saw puffs of smoke on the day, but I think the thing that really clinched it for me recently was talking to the Secret Service agent, now retired, Paul Landis, who was literally on the limousine running board in the car behind the president. He saw the president's head explode as he was hit by a bullet. And the confronting and shocking thing is that his recollection is that the shot came from the front left, i.e. from the grassy knoll.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Left? The grassy knoll would have been on the front right. I just want to clarify that. That was an error. I also wanted to talk about Robert Groden a little bit. The gentleman that we just saw in that report, if you're not familiar with Bob Groden, he is truly one of the last pioneers who's still around in the JFK research community. Of course, Harold Weisberg died a long time ago. Jim Garrison died 30 years ago. Mark Lane passed away, I think, about 7 years ago. We're losing so many of the greats, and Robert Groden made a tremendous contribution to our understanding of what happened to John F. Kennedy, because as you know, Life magazine, Time Life, kept the Zapruder film from the public for 12 years after the assassination. The public never had seen anything but a few still photographs that were published in Life magazine in 1963. And then they locked that film away. They were hiding it from the American people. Bob Groden happened to work there as a photographic technician. He got his hands on it, made a bootleg copy. He was a whistleblower. Arguably, it was illegal. but he did it for the public's right to know. And then he took that film to Geraldo Rivera. And at that time, Geraldo, this was 1975, Geraldo was hosting a show called Good Night America, which was a late night talk show kind of thing on ABC. And they showed the Zapruder film for the very first time on national television. And wow, I mean, you can find the video of it. Actually, it's on YouTube. And it's stunning when you realize that that was the first time anyone outside of a few had actually seen the Zapruder film. And there's an audible gasp from the studio audience at that moment that the third shot, the headshot, hit Kennedy.
I want to introduce another guest we have, Robert Groden, who is celebrating his 18th birthday on the 22nd of November in 1963. He was profoundly touched by the president's death, and he desperately wanted to understand how it could have happened. For 2 years, he, like most Americans, believed in the official version, the Warren Commission version of what happened, but the day he first saw that 8mm Zapruder film, that amateur film that was made, that was the day he stopped believing. Robert, welcome, and I wish you could set up the Zapruder film a bit for us, and we'll get right into it.
Okay. Abraham Zapruder was a Dallas dress manufacturer, and it was pure accident that he brought the camera with him that day. He almost didn't. And he was looking for a good vantage point, and he picked a point on Elm Street in Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. As the motorcade passed in front of him, he got what is, frame for frame, the most valuable historical document of all time.
It's become very chic among television producers to put a disclaimer at the head of any film. The film you're about to see might be shocking, it might be horrifying, you might not want your kids to watch it. And I think the unfortunate net effect of that is to make more people watch it. Well, I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy. And Bob and Dick, would you please narrate what we're seeing as we show this film?
This is commercial footage leading into Dealey Plaza. This is the car on Main Street.
So this film was taken by actual newsmen. This was spliced together with the Abraham Zapruder film?
Yes.
All right, so this is the beginning of the motorcade.
Okay, what you're seeing now is in slow motion so that you can grasp what is happening. This is a film taken by Marie Muchmore that leads into the Zapruder film. It's for time continuity. The president is waving to the crowd here.
And Jacqueline Kennedy, of course, is sitting alongside him in the open car.
Right. This is from Orville Nix's film. This is originally 8mm footage. And they're heading now toward Elm Street. They're on Houston Street now. They're going to make a left-hand turn. It's on the corner where they're going to make the turn there that the book depository was. Now, this is the Zapruder film.
Okay, so the cars are coming along now into Dealey Plaza?
Yes, these are the lead motorcycles of the motorcade.
All right, now with the president and Mrs. Kennedy is also Governor Connolly.
Right. Now, before he goes behind the sign, the president is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the sign, he is shot, then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit?
He's already been hit.
And now?
And at the bottom of the screen, the headshot.
That's the shot that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movies.
Now, the Warren Commission said that all of the shots were fired from behind by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin, firing at the president. And as you can see, clearly, the head is thrown violently backwards, completely consistent with a shot from the front, right. Now, this is an extreme blow-up of just the president from the film.
All right.
Coming out behind the sign, he's shot.
He's hit from
He's hit here.
From the front, too.
From the front. Now, Jackie doesn't realize what's happened yet. She goes to his aid.
And now? He's hit
Again, the violent backward motion. Totally consistent with 80% of the witnesses, which said the shot came from the grassy knoll in front and to the right.
It's interesting to note how many people is running towards where most folks thought the shots came from.
The head goes backwards in the next film from the other side of the street.
Oh, God, that's awful. That's the most upsetting thing I've ever seen. We'll talk about it in a minute. When I had finished reading through the recent news stories on the renewed interest in the assassination of President Kennedy, because there is real renewed interest, my first response was to ask if there was any new evidence that either a conspiracy existed or, more generally, that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't acting alone on that November day in 1963 when President Kennedy was killed and the New Frontier was closed. My reaction now, after listening to Dick and to Bob and to Ralph and seeing that incredible and very horrifying film, is to ask what's wrong with the old evidence. The official explanation of the Warren Commission that Oswald was acting alone is just so difficult to reconcile with the evidence that exists today. Now, if you can remember back and be honest to when all these theories about conspiracies first came out in the mid-60s, then we treated the researchers and the people doing this investigation as kind of paranoid kooks. I mean, let's be honest, that's the way it was. But now we've all lived through the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, dirty tricks, and even the allegations, and I stress the point that they're only allegations, that the CIA and the FBI, institutions that are so solid in American history and the fabric of American society, have engaged in illegal operations against American citizens. Well, because of all that, I think that most people are now more willing to listen to opposing points of view. I think one thing is certain. There are just too many loose ends. John Kennedy was murdered, and we at least owe him the duty of doing everything possible to find out who all was involved. Now, possibly, just possibly, the Warren Commission was right, and it was just the act of a single madman, however unlikely that seems now. But what if it wasn't? With the perspective of more than 11 years of history between then and now, an intensive official investigation could and should be launched. Even if there's just one chance in 1,000 or even one chance in 1,000,000 that the assassination was more than we were told it was. That's it for now.
So we can thank Robert Groden for that. He was also a consultant on the 1978 House Select Committee on Assassinations. Was analyzing a lot of the photographic evidence, and it just doesn't get any better than Bob Groden. And I want to say this: Bob Groden has devoted his entire life to this case, and he moved to Dallas, I think some 25 years ago, maybe longer than that. And he's out there, now that he's getting older, he can't do it every day. But he used to be out there in Dealey Plaza every single day for years and years and years. And just there to talk to curious passersby, tourists, visitors. If you've ever been to Dealey Plaza, you probably have talked to Robert Groden. He's usually sitting there with his table, and he sells his books, and he just, talks to people about JFK and tries to educate them. And funny thing, November 22nd is his birthday.
Oh boy.
Yeah. There's kind of an interesting factoid about him, and it might explain why the case has always been so important to him. He has literally a very personal connection to it. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Bruce. What did you think of that clip that we just played?
I was struck by the announcer's comments at the end. It's compared to what anyone can find in books, it's so little. But for a mainstream news show to be that willing to acknowledge, gee, I think it's compelling. Okay, great. Thank you very much. We've come a long way in 60 years. We got the word compelling out of this man. I was in 8th grade when I saw the advertisement, probably in TV Guide, that the Zapruder film was going to be shown for the first time. And I didn't know what it was until I read the description. My gosh, so I saw that live on Friday, March 6, 1975, when.
Me too.
Oh, wow.
Me too. And my parents actually let me stay up late to watch that. You know, they aired it late at night so that the little kids wouldn't see it in prime time, but little kids like you and me, we were interested. And so I had to beg my parents to let me stay up and watch it. And they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember being really repulsed by the first time seeing that headshot. And yesterday over Zoom, I saw Robert Groden give a talk at one of the conferences in Dallas that are happening right now.
Saw that.
Yeah. And he said that he's either been ticketed or arrested, probably just ticketed 82 times.
82 times, yes.
Yeah.
That is a true
The
story.
police try to stop him. And this is after, I believe, winning a lawsuit. He sued about the right to use the park and whatever. So,
and he won. He eventually won that lawsuit.
And he won. Yeah, but I think he recently got another ticket though, even though he won the case.
Oh, I didn't know
if
that.
I heard him right. It doesn't matter.
Man.
The point is, it's like how you described the 50th anniversary celebration. You know, they did not want anywhere near the cameras if they could prevent it at the 50th anniversary. People like you and me, I wasn't there, or you know, you were working as a reporter. Researchers who wanted to say the official story is just meaningless compared to all that we can find in those things nobody uses anymore, books.
You know, I think they did that on the 50th anniversary, restricting access to the plaza. Of course, they did it to keep all the conspiracy people out, but I really believe that they did it to keep Robert Groden out of Dealey Plaza because he is synonymous with JFK conspiracy research in Dealey Plaza. And at that time, he was still being harassed and ticketed by the city. I think his lawsuit was ongoing against the city at that time for them restricting his right to free speech. And a lot of us in the JFK research community think that that's the whole reason that they did that 10 years ago in Dealey Plaza, saying we don't want that Bob Groden guy here. And it was really the sixth floor museum who was behind the harassment of Robert Groden, you know, because he was out there telling a narrative that was completely different from what they teach at the sixth floor museum, which is the official Warren Commission was right narrative.
Well, a few hours ago, I interviewed Paul Blow on my show. And he's one of the contributors of the JFK assassination chokeholds that inescapably prove there was a conspiracy with James DiEugenio and a bunch of others.
Matter of fact, Jim DiEugenio will be our guest next Saturday night right here on Strange Bedfellows to talk about the new book, Chokehold, and a lot more.
Nice.
He's a friend of the show. He'll be coming back to see us again.
Nice. Well, Paul makes this exact point that his interest began about 10 years ago when he realized that textbooks in schools in Canada and America are still teaching the Warren Commission, as if completely unaware of the number of official investigations that have brought so much differentiating evidence to light that it's a joke. He accuses the American Historical Association of violating their code of conduct, which says in black and white, you're supposed to stay current with new revelations and new discoveries in history. Nope, still the Warren Commission. So he was great to talk to.
And isn't it ironic, Bruce, that because that's kind of what your book is all about the teaching of history backwards or telling us lies. That's why we called the show tonight JFK, 60 Years of Lies. Don't you think it's ironic 60 years later when we see that schools are still teaching the official narrative of this story? Isn't it ironic that the building that's now the sixth floor museum where Oswald supposedly fired the shots was a school book building? It's where they had the school books stored for schools around Dallas and around much of the Southwest. That's what they did at the Texas School Book Depository was they provided school books to the kids.
Yep. And in addition to what evidence I've seen, I haven't studied it to a certainty, that the operations there, especially in the school book business on a couple of the floors, there were other businesses on a couple other floors, but the whole thing is a very, very sketchy setup, from the ownership of the building, D.H., I think, Bird.
D.H. Bird. That's
and,
right.
A close confidant of many in the military industrial complex, and also the oil and LBJ and things like that. So
Yep.
What a sketchy little theater that Texas School Book Depository might have been to some extent.
And they let that building sit there dilapidated and empty for almost 30 years before they did something with it. The School Book Depository moved out within a few years of the assassination, and D.H. Bird, the owner, who had all of these mysterious intelligence connections, he did nothing with the building on this prime real estate in downtown Dallas. But he didn't rent it out, didn't do anything with it, just let it sit there. But there's a fascinating story about Mr. Bird, and I don't know if you've heard this one, but he had the window that Oswald supposedly fired from removed, I think shortly after a few years after the assassination, when the building was closed. He had that window taken out, and it was put in his house. Like when you'd go to his house, in his living room, he had this sort of grotesque museum about the JFK assassination. And he loved to show his visitors the actual window, right? The assassin's window. So when you go to the museum today, the window that you see when you tour the museum is actually not the supposed window that Oswald fired the shots from.
Yeah, I've heard that referred to.
Near it.
Pardon?
They won't let you get near it too. They have that whole window glassed in, and there's boxes stacked up, supposedly like the sniper's nest looked on that day. But you can't go behind the glass. You can't stand at the window so that you can see that the trajectory of that shot was damn near impossible to make.
Yeah,
you can stand in the window next to it,
right,
but
right.
not the window, because you might also notice that, hey, this isn't the original window.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think what I saw more than once or twice is they cordoned off that area because unanimously, so people would look out that window and just say, "Well, this looks pretty almost impossible," So
no way.
They needed to cordon it off with plexiglass or whatever they've done.
That's right.
And I also have seen it referred to that Bird took it home as a kind of a trophy, which I thought, well, that's just trying to cast aspersions. Except you learn that he was a big game hunter, or maybe it was a trophy of another kill that he was proud of.
So, Bruce, what are you trying to achieve by writing this book?
I'm trying to achieve inspiring people to confirm what's in it and no longer blindly believe the media or the government. Nothing the government or the mainstream media says can be taken at face value. And this was before the medical situation of the last few years, which, like Voldemort, might have to remain nameless because of the platform.
We are on YouTube, unfortunately.
That's exactly. So say no more. Yep. All right. But that's it, and also in a court of law, I believe they tell juries, if a witness is proven to be lying about something, you can't believe anything they've said. So by that measure, oh boy, before the government says, this is what you have to do because this is the reason, or this just happened and this is who did it. Since 1963, we cannot just swallow that at face value. So that's what I'm trying to achieve, Rick. Just giving everybody a BS detector and trying to inspire them to think for themselves. And hopefully there's plenty in the book that inspires hope, because it's an unrelenting list of the many, many ways we are effed beyond description.
You know, Rick says that on the show all the time. We've even had, "Hey, we are so screwed."
Yeah.
That's Rick's
So
favorite saying is, "We are so
that,
screwed."
you know, you hope it gives people hope. In what sense?
In the sense that I hopefully well describe reasons to have a spiritual imagination and reasons to imagine that we're very, very powerful beings in a completely spiritual, loving, welcoming, encouraging, almost magical realm. That's one level of the hope. The other level of the hope is, for me at least, is all these horrible things aren't happening because all these different groups are filled with hate and trying to kill us and kill each other. They're being orchestrated, paid, bribed, coerced, controlled from a level above the puppets. So it's kind of the satisfaction of Toto and the Wizard of Oz pulling the curtain back, and you're seeing this is what's been doing this to me. And compared to all the people involved with all the banks and corporations that are screwing us, Rick, that's a very small number compared to the vast rest of the 8 billion of us. So the hope is that when enough of us know, enough of us could resist in a meaningful way that improves things for us.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.